So, hi everyone, Carl here. Bit of a different episode than normal today. You can see I'm not on my own, and I'm not talking about the dog. I'm talking about my friend Aaron here. And the idea of today's episode really is just to have a bit of a freestyle conversation. He's a friend and someone who's helped me over the last few months and has a lot of interesting things to say. So I thought it'd be good for everybody who listens to the podcast, perhaps bring him on and just have a chat, really, if that's all right. So
yeah, sounds brilliant, mate.
We've got our cups of tea. And
Dog biscuits.
Dog biscuits and the normal stuff you'd expect. So yeah, Aaron, thank you for joining me first.
No worries, thanks, mate. This for me is brilliant. It's an opportunity, I think, that shows both of us stepping up in the sense of pushing comfort. So Carl and I met, our kids used to go to school together, just down the road, and so we met through school, and I think the first time I really clocked you before your ginger hair was the Tottenham cap, which is ironic because just the day before or that morning I had a phone call to say, hey, can you come and work with Tottenham? Anyway, I should introduce myself. Really,
no, but you know why that was? It was because Spurs had just qualified for the Champions League final.
Yeah.
So I was wearing that hat with pride.
Celebrating. Well, lifelong.
Yeah, exactly. Lifelong. I should have started with that. This is Aaron, he's a lifelong Spurs fan. He's getting tongued by a dog. Right.
Yeah, so I am born and bred in the West Country. And at the age of 16, I joined the Royal Marines. And then I joined the SAS. And then after maybe 10 years service total, I decided that's enough for me. I wanted to explore some other opportunities. And I went to as a lot of ex-military lads do, onto the private military circuit. And then after a while of that, having a young family, spending a lot of time away from home, I decided I wanted something else. There's something else for me. Mm-hmm. So I got the dog onto the table.
I don't know, he's definitely showing off because he's never climbed on the table. Go to your bed. I'm just going to stop a second while we control the dog.
And the doorbell.
Perfect. Good. Right, okay, so...
so that led me from working away from home a lot, mm-hmm. long rotations, at high risk environments, to wanting to be closer to home, close to my family. So I took some time off from work, almost 2 years I think. Was able to look after my daughter and my son for quite a long time there, which was an awesome experience. Mm-hmm. Retrained as a personal trainer. Did that for a couple of years in a local commercial gym, and then qualified as a life coach a couple of months ago, earlier on this year. Mm-hmm. And now I'm coaching and doing a bit of personal training, and if the job suits, but less and less, dipping my toe into security work. So fantastic. A varied background.
Absolutely, and I think this is I've known you probably with two different hats, like Aaron the dad, who we chat about football and stuff and our kids and everything outside of school, and then also as a coach. Yeah. And this is why one of the reasons I wanted to have you and have us have a chat today, because you've helped me a lot with coaching. And it wasn't even directly for the podcast. It was more for another business idea I'd had in the past. And although that didn't work out, I think the help that gave me was to be more willing to take chances.
Yeah, 100%. Something I think is that if there's... So one of my jobs as a coach now is I use all the experience I've got, and I refer to life experience, certain situations, and try and help people play with their perspective. Because when we're brought up by our parents, we go to certain schools, certain communities, certain cultures, we learn to see the world in a certain way. Yeah. And I don't think that doesn't always align, and I often use that sort of like central alignment thing from our instinct to our intellect. It doesn't quite align, so it's like we're looking through the world with a different set of glasses, and they've been handed down, and they're not necessarily ours to wear. So my job is to play with perspective there, mm-hmm. and help you or help my clients, challenge that. And for me, this is exactly that. You challenged certain perspectives about certain beliefs, mm-hmm. which enabled you to realise that what we started working on, actually, that's not what I want. But the skills and perspective that you had gained over that time allowed you to use that as a platform for this, which
like,
is
like
awesome.
opening more doors. And then when you were talking about that just now, it reminded me of like when you're at school, you have to make choices about what you want to do at college, potentially university. I remember we had, I think it's called Kudos. It was this, you answer loads of questions on a computer and it spat out like the jobs that you should do. I think I got, one of them was florist.
Artistic.
But the thing, what I'm trying to say here is that it was telling me, okay, this is what you should do. And that perception, like you kind of get molded into a certain way by beliefs, community, what your parents think you should do. And to try and choose a career that you're going to do for the rest of your life is crazy. And I think you do really narrow down your perception, your beliefs into what's possible and what's not possible through experience, through doors closing in your face. And one of the good things since like meeting you and focusing on the coaching is the fact that I feel like more doors have opened and I'm more willing to try things despite having that feeling of fear. And even doing things like this today, like I was nervous about recording it, and I've done 20 something episodes on the podcast, but just having a camera on me and introducing somebody else to it was nerve wracking because it's different. But I'm willing to challenge those things.
Yeah, exactly, because the outcome of that, I guess, it means it's got less of an impact on Carl. It doesn't make him any better or any worse. It just is, and that is all about perspective. And beliefs about what that means.
Of course. And not only that, one of the things you've asked me before, and I think this is useful for people listening to this on a more focused, on a weight loss journey, is what is the worst that can happen? And we've talked a lot in the past about survival instincts and how this is something that we don't control. Yeah. But it's there.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times, so I had a friend reach out to me and say, "Hey, listen, I'm becoming a life coach. I need to practice. Are you up for it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's go for it." I knew roughly what that was, coaching, and I was quite willing to go into dark places, but really they're just uncomfortable because my brain was trying to keep me safe. And so my journey has gone from a external and physical to internal and emotional, and by that I mean, one of my beliefs that I took away from school was I'm not clever, or I think it was that. I'm not clever for whatever reason, certain incidents at primary school in regards to maths, times table, GCSE results, and so I defined myself for a long time by those. So if I couldn't prove myself through intellect, then it was going to be through physical. So I looked to the biggest physical challenges I could do to show the world, hey, this is me, love me, basically. Right. And I come from a completely normal, loving home. Do you know what I mean? And what I just say, they're like daily traumas. There's nothing gone wrong. It's just I'm looking at stuff through faulty lenses and a little not injuries, little Adidas, it is injuries, isn't it? Little scars add up.
Exactly that.
And to make them whatever you mean.
Yeah.
And so now my journey has gone from that, from trying to prove the world who I am, learning to accept myself for all the good bits and all the bad bits. And it's internal. You don't see the work that we do, and it's emotional for me rather than physical. And again, it's hard to show that, except in things like you doing a podcast, whereas probably 6 months ago, no chance.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
No, there wasn't.
And you're not eradicating those emotions that come up as in terms of fear or excitement or it's just we just learn to choose to see that as energy, trying to guide us towards some sort of action, and it's how we respond to that, how we relate to that.
I agree, and I think that if I think about what's changed in my external environment,
I was just going to ask you what has been your biggest change then from, or takeaway from the time that we did coaching together, do you think?
I was actually going to contradict myself there by saying I think the first thing I've realised is that in my external environment, nothing's changed. My wife is still exactly the same as she was, our relationship 6 months ago, which is good. My boys haven't really changed in 6 months. The dog's still a pain. And so that hasn't changed. But what has changed is internal.
Yeah.
And I think from our coaching, for me, it's been more about not caring so much what other people will say or think, and listening to that internal voice that says you want to do something, so do it. Because
Mm-hmm.
the strange thing is that like the people and a lot of my closest friends still don't even know that I've got a podcast, because I'm at some level still concerned about what they will say. And although at the moment I'm kind of like in my own bubble, I feel safe in that bubble because, you know, the people that I'm speaking to, the listeners, are people who hopefully are enjoying the pod. Hope you're enjoying it. But it's all within the same environment. Whereas people who are my friends who might not necessarily be into podcasts or think, well, I'm maybe not qualified to talk about weight loss or have conversations with people about weight loss, because for most of my life I've been a bit fat. That still makes me nervous. Yeah. But I feel closer to that acceptance of being able to do it anyway. Yeah. Although I think it's a process.
100% it is. When I first started working on myself, and I think you brought this up as well, that often we're here now, and that's what coaching is about. We're here now. We don't have to go back into the past to try and push us forward. Mm-hmm. This is where we are. This is where we want to get to. What's in the way? And in the end, you realise that at least in my case, I'm going to own this, that you never really get there. Do you know what I mean? It just like, it's a process. In my mind, it's a bridge, and this is like ingrained in my memory. I remember being coached by my mate, and some of the limiting beliefs that I had, and that I was with love, but with my own sort of broken lens and shitty self-doubts and beliefs, was imposing onto my kids, trying to help them. And once that was highlighted to me, that was like a weight in my stomach. And I remember going away for that weekend to Andorra to celebrate my wife's birthday, and just behind our apartment was this big river with this wooden bridge across, quite big slats, and for me that's how I used to measure my career progress. But in the end I came to realise that I'm never going to get to the end. It's always a little bit further, but that's a good thing, because again, that takes you away from, which is one of my biggest things, is into that acceptance, rather than measuring what you're doing, what she's doing, how much they've got, how much they've lost in terms of weight or whatever. It comes back to me. What have I done for me? Do you know what I mean? It's like quieting down the noise on everything else. Realisation you're only in competition with yourself. Yeah, 100%.
And the bridge is something that I now use as a tool that you've shown me, that if I'm sat at the middle or stood at the middle of that bridge, can I do something today that's going to take me one step closer to the side, or will I do something that takes me one step further back, or do nothing that keeps you in the same position? And that's really helpful, because in fact it was only a couple of days ago I was doing an episode with someone, and they said that you don't have to see the whole staircase, just that first step. And that's the same as the bridge, I think. But if you try and aim for too much too quickly, sometimes you don't even know really how to get there, or if that's what you want. Like my coach says to me, if you're at a 2 on your journey, whatever that might be, in terms of the podcast, let's take that as an example, and you want to be at a 10, what is your 10 going to tell your 2? To get closer, to learn, to make those mistakes now. You're not going to suddenly take a pill and magic yourself to 10, because you wouldn't have that experience, that competence, made those mistakes. It's about what you make those mean. And I was going to say something there about self-belief. And because when you want to project yourself to that end, you're trying to take shortcuts. Really, you need to build, there you go, competence. So often we feel that, I'm going to again own this, often I feel like confidence, or the way that I choose to see confidence now, is a byproduct of competence. So if I've done set amount of times, I will become competent, therefore I'm confident because I know I can do it. But really, in terms of emotions, for me that didn't work. And it doesn't work for us, because filming your first video, you haven't done this before, so you're going to get certain feelings that are going to try and protect you from it. Like right now I want to check to see that it's still recording. I'm sure you do. Make sure it's still recording. Because I've seen anything in shit, what if this isn't recording? Right, take 2. But no, it's good. It is good. But do you know what I mean? So we think confidence, we're not a confident person because you feel nervous, but it's just haven't got the competence yet. So self-competence is the ability to generate that within ourselves, knowing we're enough, or learning that we're enough, and that result doesn't directly impact us as a person, doesn't make any better or any worse. It comes back to acceptance, which is probably one of my biggest things, is acceptance. Just learning
learning to be okay with who we are, take responsibility for that. Yeah.
This is something that I've taken from coaching, that first of all, and it's something that when I first started doing the podcast episodes, I used the phrase "be kind to yourself" quite a lot, completely ripping it off from you.
No, I ripped it off from my coach.
but using it because it resonates, and especially with the people that I've began speaking to and the community of weight loss, the weight loss community in general, this is something that I think is such an important message.
Yeah.
And that goes hand in hand with acceptance. And one of the things I've learned from the interviews that I've done and people I've become friends with is that you can lose weight, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee acceptance.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And a lot of the time it can actually go the other way, that it creates a lot of new challenges, a lot of new doubts, a lot of new concerns, because before someone's gone on that journey to transform themselves and lost the weight that they have, I wouldn't say they were confident, but they were aware of where they were, and they knew exactly where they were. Whereas people who have lost weight quickly or changed, you can't always necessarily take that mental health progression at the same pace as you've lost weight. And a lot of people find themselves a bit lost. Okay, I look different, but I feel the same, or who am I now? I feel like this fat person inside, and that's quoting people who have told me that although I've changed, I don't feel any different.
Yeah.
And you mentioned acceptance, and I think this is a really good theme of our conversation today. What kind of tools or how do you think people could perhaps get closer to that acceptance? Is it a long journey? Is it something they need help with, therapy, coaching, or are there things people can do to perhaps help themselves in the initial stages?
That's a good question. I think it is a journey, and for me, one of my things is acceptance leads to compassion, and the way that I choose to see it, and I try and help my clients, is to show that spend a lot of times in our own head, so we can be our best friends or worst enemies. We're constantly kicking the shit out of each other.
Yeah.
Chances are, it's not always productive. Well, in fact, it's not, is it? Productive to be sitting that sort of mindset or frame of mind. So I think it is a journey, but the difference for me now is, so if I take mistakes, when I raise my voice to my kids, for example, and what I want to do is be the best dad that I can for my kids, once you get to that certain age, that's what it's all about. But really, if I'm projecting certain beliefs or my own incapacity to understand or process my emotions onto them, that's not really fair. So it's like, come back to myself, but that's okay. And it is a process, and a long time I was learning, and I use that phrase, I'm learning to accept myself. I'm learning to accept myself.
That's the other one that I took from the coaching. I'm
learning,
to accept myself.
And I think I still make mistakes, I still get upset, I still raise my voice, but the time that I'm in that negative energy of beating myself up is less and less and less. And so sometimes you catch it or you walk away. Do you know what I mean? In regards to our kids. So, acceptance. I think at the end of the day, it'll be about owning where you are.
Okay.
Taking responsibility for that, what the things that you can, which often in a lot of ways it sort of like cancels out all the exterior things and comes back, and there's only a few things we really can control, which is a good thing, because there's less variables there.
So from acceptance to awareness, and being aware of the fact that you can only change and impact certain things.
Yeah.
And if you're able to separate the things you can control against the things that you're unable to control, and then kind of, I guess, draw a division between those and focus on what you can control.
100%.
And try and let go as much as you can of those other things. And those other things, just to try and give some context to them, could be other people's opinions.
100%.
Yeah.
Things you can't control.
Yeah, things you can't control.
So politics, the weather, other people's opinions, things that we can control. More importantly, our attitude, even though that's can be a challenge at times.
That's quite a broad topic as well. In terms of, I agree completely, but in terms of our attitude, that is something we can control. But do you think that people sometimes need to go on that journey of developing or changing their attitude?
Yeah, because I think if you're looking to external factors to give you your self-worth, for likes on Instagram, from comments from your partner, for a certain amount of kilograms lost, or even for blokes, a certain amount of kilograms lifted, then we're sort of like handing the responsibility of our happiness to other people. That's why for me, this interview, it doesn't matter if it's the best interview you've ever done or the worst one, or for me, because it's about our willingness to feel those feelings, do it anyway, and we're not reliant, which could be, we're reliant on other people's feedback or opinions to make us feel good or bad about ourselves. And it's not to say that won't happen. Mm-hmm. We're all human, but do you know where I'm coming from?
No, I get exactly where you're coming from, because internally and then it sounds really crazy, but just the fact of setting up 2 microphones, hitting record and having a conversation, like internally it generates all kinds of different feelings, because it's going outside myself. So one of the things I wanted to mention today is hitting that upper limit. Yeah. And then going beyond it until you find your new upper limit, because that's another thing that you've helped me with. And I think that a lot of the people who listen to the podcast, losing weight for them brings them to that upper limit. Mm-hmm. And then it's almost a case of what happens next. Yeah. Because they're now outside of their comfort zone, although being overweight didn't necessarily make them happy or comfortable. It's where, like I said, they knew where they were. Mm-hmm. And so for the people now who have lost weight or are making changes, there's that fear factor of, okay, will I be accepted? How do I accept myself as a different person?
Yeah, but and it comes back to me of going again inside yourself. Do I accept myself? Mm-hmm. Well, if not, how can we expect others to accept us? It's like, for me, can I love myself? If I'm not loving myself, and I sometimes flick-flack between compassion, because for me, like, love is an act, it's a verb, but often we paint it up as romantic fires. It's gone out, by the way, mate.
Well, remember, it doesn't last forever. This is real life.
There's an actual fire there.
That was it.
I lost my train of thought there with my shitty jokes.
Right.
So if I can't love myself, how can I love my kids?
Okay, yeah.
You know, or I'm looking at the love that I've got from my kids through a different lens. You know, if they do this, I'll love them. If they don't do that, then I won't. Or they do that, then I won't. You know, so. Of course. But really, it's about myself. It comes back to me. Can I learn to love myself? Which is, like you said, the first stage is acceptance. I am here. I'm learning to be okay with that. And sometimes, we sit in that for a long, long time with lots of different factors and make mistakes. We buy into other people's opinions. We distract ourselves with food, drink, with our phone, with YouTube, with Netflix, the list goes on.
Yeah, of course. Anything really to take you away from that area of focus that you probably need the most.
And sometimes learning to love ourselves can be quite uncomfortable, you know, accepting all those faults, whereas I choose now personally to see my faults as what got me to this table to speak to you. Yeah. And then if it helps no one, it's helped me and you push our little boundaries of comfort and progression. And inevitably, as you already know from the brilliant work you've done, it does help people, it does bring people together, it does inspire them, etc.
That in itself, I think, helps in terms of acceptance, because you see the positive impact that it's having. And at some point it is validation, but at the same time there's external validation and internal validation that's happening at the same time. So
you're not reliant on that. It's nice to feel, you get that when your kid gives you a hug and says, "Dad, I love you." It gives you a warm, cozy feeling, but you're not waiting the whole day for that.
No. But I wonder if there's some people who currently, and this is like the process and journey people are going on, that they begin needing that external validation.
Depends on the person, and we're all human. Mm-hmm. We're all human. And one of the really interesting things for me was, and for us working, and when I was getting coached as well, and still do get coached, by the way. In fact, I come straight from this to my coach, who probably ripped me, no, not going to rip me a new one, but do you know what I mean? Show me the world that I'm looking through, and it's still slightly warped here. But anyway, sorry, what were we speaking about there just before that?
Just like the external versus internal validation, and whether somebody who, and I'm using it with like examples in my mind, and I'm not explaining them to you, so it's making it a bit more difficult for me to know what I'm thinking about. But like, again, focused on people who've been on a weight loss journey. A lot of the time, people become frustrated initially because others are not noticing their weight loss.
Because we're putting it out there.
Exactly that.
Rather than in here.
Whereas over the course of time, it becomes less about what the other people think and more about how that person feels. You know, when they call them non-scale victories. So rather than what the scales are telling you in terms of weight you've lost, you might go out and find a pair of jeans that hadn't fit for the last 15 years, and all of a sudden you're brave enough, you put them on and they fit perfectly. And this kind of validation that you give yourself, the confidence that can grow from that, I think leads
self-confidence.
to self-confidence.
Yeah.
Exactly, that is something that it doesn't require external validation. It's how you feel about it. And I think for a lot of people, that's where the area of focus should be in terms of getting closer to acceptance, because the people I've spoken to, and not everyone's the same, of course, everyone has different paths, different journey, different, I'll say, parts of the journey that they're on currently that impact how they feel about themselves and other people towards them. But for a lot of people, I think it's very difficult to have that self-acceptance until they feel that they've got that external validation. And then what I'm trying to say, the long-winded way of doing this, is that do you think there are quite simple tools or methods that people could perhaps use to focus less on the external validation and more on themselves, and how to identify those moments where they can actually think, okay, that's a win, I can be positive about that?
It's different for different people.
Randy, get down.
Been 10 minutes, boy. It's about processing dogs. No,
Yeah, he's come to see me now. You can't see what's going on under the table here, but it is just a dog, I promise. Yeah. Oh, you can see him here. Here he is.
Sorry, completely lost the train. Is there things people can do in terms of the process and tools? I don't think there's any shortcut. I think it's practice. And again, it's like learning to see and take responsibility for where we are, rather than blaming external factors, and take baby steps consistently towards that. Baby steps. And when we mess up, we'll take those 2 steps back on our bridge over the river in Andorra. You spend less time choose to spend less time beating yourself up.
Okay. But at the same time, allow it to process. And then you gave a really good analogy of like a roller coaster, or when you see that big slope that goes up and comes down the peak and trough. But if you, instead of trying to like suppress the feeling or that emotion in that moment where you have a moment of self-doubt, where you're not sure about yourself, let it ride. Let that feeling come up. Let it sit there. Think about how you feel, and then let it go and dissipate. And disappear.
Yeah, so emotions come from thoughts, and thoughts, I think on average we have 70 and 80,000 thoughts a day.
Wow,
that's the only statistic I'm going to throw at you.
It's
written on the back of my hand.
I didn't know that, so that's a good one.
So a lot of those automatic, they're trying to help us. And one thing that I lost my train of thought was earlier on was what really helped me to learn to understand myself was simplifying the way that the brain works and understanding that it's built for survival. So it's not interested in your happiness, it's trying to keep you alive. It will avoid discomfort. It doesn't know the difference between a real danger and just a video of a podcast.
Okay.
And a real, as your example, the saber-toothed tiger.
The saber-toothed tiger. This was my, and why that became, I'm not even really scared of saber-toothed tigers. I've never met one, to be fair.
But the feeling you have would be the same if you were confronted with one of that.
Because the brain doesn't know the difference between getting nervous about a podcast and about to be eaten by a saber-toothed tiger.
So if you try and suppress that feeling and sit in that resistance and lack of acceptance, that's when the sort of the problems can arise, because you sit in that energy state for a long time. So on one half your brain is trying to avoid danger, which in modern day life doesn't really exist as much for almost all of us.
In terms of survival kind of instinct.
Exactly, and it's looking for pleasure. So every single time it's going to look for the quick dopamine hit, the quick like, the quick bit of external recognition. So understanding that my brain is built for survival, it's trying to keep me alive, and that my fear is probably outdated.
Okay.
As well as that, we are tribal creatures, built for connection. And when we think we're going to be isolated from our tribe, then again, that signal of like speaking your truth, puts hairs on the back of your neck, because potentially you're going to be open for criticism. You're going to be isolated and die alone slow death away from your tribe outside of the cave and getting eaten by
saber-toothed tigers.
or dogs.
But just a feeling, yeah, there's, you can't see it on camera, there's a war going on between my cat and dog. I don't know why the cat doesn't fight back, to be fair. I think he enjoys it. But no, so just to summarise that, because we're running out of time, the internal chatter, that busy feeling of not accepting yourself, what others might think, it comes from a very primal place.
100%, yeah, which we can't control.
Mm-hmm.
So do you fight that? And like we use the analogy of trying to push the beach ball under the water,
yeah,
and hold it down there, or and if we do that, it explodes back up. And especially in my case, was like me getting really snappy with my kids. We all do. They're challenging. We love them. We want the best for them. But that was a few clear examples to me of whoa, I'm jumping too far ahead here. Or like you say, allowing them. They come and then they go.
Yeah.
Come and then they go.
And I think if I can give like one takeaway from this session today, is for people who watch this and have those feelings of not accepting themselves or doubt, just to try and ride the feelings. The next time they're in a situation where they don't feel sure of themselves, to maybe question, is it because of what somebody else might think? Is it because of a feeling they have themselves? And just to observe it.
Yeah.
And not necessarily have to do anything with it,
exactly,
but just to be aware of it, because that awareness leads to acceptance. And I think you said competence leads to confidence.
Exactly, yeah. So the other thing was that our feelings, our emotions, not quite the same thing, but that they are trying to drive an action.
Okay.
But often we misinterpret those and buy into them. So the way that I choose to see emotions now is energy in motion. So that feeling of disappointment or nerves is trying to drive a certain action.
Okay.
And when we don't listen to that, when we hold on to it, when we resist it, even if that's the feeling of failure, potentially, for example, that is, we don't buy into that, but maybe there's a message in that, or maybe we just need to decide ahead of time what we're going to do in terms of drinks. How many drinks are you going to have tonight? It's going to be 3 and I'm done.
Okay.
So that energy is
carry on.
It's trying to that emotion is trying to drive an action. It's trying to help you.
So observing that emotion rather than necessarily rejecting it or
100%. And a great one is you're feeling slightly down because your partner's had rough words with you. It happens. Does that make you a shitty person?
Mm-hmm.
Do we start blaming our partner, and then we just start pushing that down, going onto social media, trying to look for the quick dopamine hits, flicking through certain pages that make us feel good?
Mm-hmm.
And we get into a big habit loop, but we won't go into that. But what I'm trying to say is that rather than sit with that, okay, what could I do about that? What have I done that maybe next time I could do differently?
Mm-hmm. And that's about owning it and taking responsibility.
Acceptance,
Acceptance.
Which for me leads to compassion, which is a choice. I was going to say earlier on, love is quite romantic fires and lovey-dovey, and everyone thinks it's really romantic. But for me, I choose compassion because it's choosing to love, even though the feeling you don't really want to. So if we can start to generate that within ourselves,
And that comes from a place of forgiveness as well.
I guess so, but it's acceptance, isn't it? It comes right
all the way back to
so
acceptance. I guess you can say as many words as you want, but it comes back to acceptance.
If you're going to look at it like that. And I think the other one thing that I would say is, if I've heard you sound a couple of times on your podcast, is one piece of advice, I'll jump in there. And I would say, don't be scared to ask for help. It doesn't make you any better or any weaker. A lot of times we isolate ourselves, think we're the only ones, when really it doesn't matter whether you've got a military background or an HR background, you still feel the same feelings because you're human. Same stresses, same highs, same lows. The difference is what do we do with those? How much
of course. And I think this is to finish, 2 things I'm going to say before we close, and I'm going to say thank you as well, Aaron, for joining me today. But so I think the dog has provided a very good, realistic example of how those feelings come up. And if you keep pushing them down, they're going to keep jumping up.
Or
if you let them ride,
you allow them, you accept them.
You end up with a much calmer experience and a dog that's not driving you crazy. But the other thing I wanted to say as well, that what you've said about a piece of advice about asking for help, because no matter what your background, where you're from, where you are on your journey, everybody, we are the same. We are humans at the end of the day, but experience the same emotions, same fears, same doubts. And that's something that I hope that this podcast can do, that no matter how you're losing weight, no matter where you are on your journey, it's about understanding that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And that you can get help, be it through the podcast, be it through a slimming group, be it through family, partners, friends, but just not to really try and tackle it on your own.
Yeah, isolate yourself. Yeah.
Brilliant. I'm going to close with a high five.
Oh, nice one. A lifelong high five.
Thank you so much for
No
joining.
worries, mate. It's been a pleasure.
We'll have you on the show again soon.
Definitely look forward to it.
Take care, mate.
Cheers.